What's up, everybody? Jessie Coffield here. This program is called The Sweat, and for the next 60 minutes, we're delivering all the latest and greatest DFS and betting advice. We're covering everything from Thursday Night Football to Game 4 of the ALCS and everything in between. Now, here to get the party started are DraftKings contributors Reed Fowler, he's here sitting next to me, and Matt Jones. So, guys, I need you to chase or fade these DK Sportsbook bets for tonight's Thursday Night Football matchup between the Chiefs and Broncos. So the spread for this game is just 3 points now. Reed, would you chase the Chiefs covering here?
I'm gonna say yes here. This one's difficult, right? Because both teams are really going towards one team's ascending and one team's not, right? The Chiefs, which is weird to say, over the last two games, they just haven't looked like the Chiefs that we're used to. Got injuries on the offensive line. Clearly, that injury to the ankle of Patrick Mahomes is going to be hurting him, and that's what's causing this line to be a little bit lower. And Denver's been playing well. Denver's been playing well. They're at home their second week, and so all of that being said, I'm still going to take the Kansas City Chiefs. I still like where they're coming from. That defense, though, in Denver, that run defense is playing a lot better. I think that works a little bit into the Kansas City's favor in terms of getting this number. I think it's going to be close, but I think they cover.
Matt, you want to chase this too? You're going to chase the Chiefs covering?
Yeah, we talked about it in the beginning of the week. I think this line is borderline insane. I have really not – I don't really see how this could possibly be a three-point game, honestly. I think Tyreek Hill coming back is a huge deal. They're a much better offense, obviously, with him. They score about half a point more per drive with Hill in the lineup since the start of last year compared to without him. So, yeah, I'm going to I just don't think that the Broncos offense can keep up. So I'll definitely chase the Chiefs here.
Well, the point total is 49. The Broncos defense has been pretty stingy this season, allowing just 18 points per game. So, Matt, given that, are you chasing the under?
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if this game went under, honestly. I don't think it's because the Broncos are gonna necessarily stop the Chiefs. I just don't know if the Broncos offense can hold up their end of the bargain and push this over 49. Like that seems a little bit high. So yeah, I'll definitely chase the under here as well.
Reed, are you going to agree and chase the under? And do you think that Matt's right in saying it's less about the Broncos defense and more about the fact that the Broncos offense can't deliver?
Yeah. Look, I mean, you have some of these skill players that we'll get to in the last segment in terms of showdown that you like on the Denver side. I think there's some leverage that you can play there. But when you talk about Joe Flacco, he's not terrible, but he's not that good either, right? He just hasn't really performed. He's not really a guy that you're worried about on the offensive side. I will say, though, that the Denver defense, and like Tyreek Hill, although he's been back, he's had some trouble in Denver playing against Denver. He always, Chris Harrison, those guys always play him pretty tough. Von Miller always plays his team. It's a division game. So I think when you have all those elements combined, I think this has a chance of going under. And look, if Denver can get, a defensive score, potentially get to Patrick Mahomes because he's not going to be able to move out of that pocket, not as mobile as he once was in the earlier the season, maybe this kind of gets to that over because this is the perfect number. I have this around 27, 23 in favor of the Chiefs, just around that number. So yeah, I think that it's going to be close, but I think it's going to stay in the under.
Speaking of Patrick Mahomes, okay, he's only been held under 300 passing yards one time this season. DK Sportsbook has his over-under at 305.5 for tonight. So Reed, would you chase the over here?
I would. And look, like I said earlier, I think it's been hard to really pinpoint what Patrick Mahomes you're going to get, especially with that ankle injury. But still, look, he had this ankle injury in the last two games, and he was still able to throw for quite a bit, 4 touchdowns, averaging about 270 yards or above. So I know that's below that 305 number, but if you just take a look at how this game and how Denver has been playing, especially against the run, if you look at their last two matchups against Austin Eckler and Derrick Henry, two running backs that have had a lot of production, a lot of success earlier in the season, they've been actually holding their rushing opponents to less than 100 yards, and they've done that quite a bit this season. I think only 2 games have gone over 100 yards rushing. And so that Denver defense right now is funneling more towards the pass, and I think that's going to work in Mahomes' favor. I'm going to say over. Matt,
what are you doing here?
Yeah, I'm going to agree there. I think this is something that you have to chase. Since the start of last year, he would be 13-9 against this line, and a couple of those losses were by literally a yard or two. So he's always sort of around that yardage number. The Broncos defense is pretty solid, but it's not like they haven't faced like world beaters. Like they've played the Frankenstein and Mariota and Tannehill. Like they had Aaron Rodgers, like all these scrub quarterbacks that can't really get there anymore. So.
Well, speaking of the rush game here, the Chiefs are giving up a ton of rushing yards, 162 yards per game this season. So which running backs over would you chase here? Phillip Lindsay, who's at 68.5, or Royce Freeman, who's at 53.5, or maybe they both can do it, Matt?
Yeah, this is tough because they're in such like a legitimate share of the opportunities here. Like Royce Freeman has actually outsnapped Phillip Lindsay, which might be surprising to some people, but he's seen 26% of the Broncos' opportunities compared to Phillip Lindsay's 31% of the opportunities. But Kansas City isn't great against the run, like you mentioned. They allow a 60% success rate against 11 personnel, and that's when Denver is sort of at their best running out of that set. So I would say that they get pretty close. I think it really hinges on a long run. So if I had to pick one, I would say Lindsay can be a little bit more explosive. So he could probably, get a third or almost half of this on one play. So I'll say an over for Lindsay, but just barely miss for Royce.
What do you think, Reed?
Yeah, when you talk about this Denver backfield, it's really interesting because now, like Matt was saying, you have Royce Freeman who's outsnapped Phillip Lindsay, but Phillip Lindsay has outproduced and he has more of the touches coming into this, right? It's really like flip if you look at both those statistics. The more efficient runner is obviously Phillip Lindsay. He's 15th in yards per attempt, while Royce Freeman is, I believe, in the 24-25 ranking in terms of rushing yards per attempt. And Freeman now is getting a lot of those red zone targets. So what Matt was saying, right? You think if there was a touch over under or touch prop, I would argue to say that both can potentially hit it because this is how you attack this Kansas City defense. They cannot defend the run. And it's just that's how they're designed right now. And really their pass defense, if you want to talk about their pass defense, they don't really have to defend anyone because the other teams are just rushing on them. And talk about injuries, Kansas City's secondary is also a little banged up. And so I think both these guys, if there's one, it's going to be Phillip Lindsay. If you just look at how that team wants to design that game scheme and what you see and how Kansas City has been beaten, it's control the clock, keep that offense off the field, and that's with both of these guys running at an impressive clip. So I'm going to say yes for Phillip Lindsay and no for Freeman.
Alrighty, thanks guys. We're going to get your showdown picks later on. We're also going to talk about tonight's ALCS Game 4 right after these words from the Pat Mayo Experience.
Let's discuss wide receivers because I see T.Y. Hilton, he's $5,900, and I'm thinking about just locking him into every lineup I play.
I do not hate the lock. I don't hate. I think that it's actually pretty reasonable. He is far and away on Daily Roto our highest value wide receiver. I don't think that anyone is within points. He's the best play.
Yeah. So like when I looked at the slate, I looked at the pricing and I thought about how people are going to approach this week, that I think I can see myself playing a lot of Goff, Cooper Kupp, T.Y. Hilton teams and figuring out the rest from there.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. Are you concerned at all about this Ram stuff? Because I think it's such an interesting question. Do you think, first of all, are you concerned about the Rams' offensive performance? And second of all, do you think that the general public, just the general DFS playing public, do you think they are concerned about the Rams?
I would say that the general public is far more concerned about the Rams offense, especially this week, than I am. One of the big things with Goff is he's so easily rattled that once you get pressure on him, he starts making very terrible decisions. And even sometimes when he's not pressured, he makes terrible decisions. He becomes Goffle, as I enjoy to say. However, Atlanta generates no pressure on the quarterback whatsoever. So it's a really optimal time for Jared Goff, coming off a week where everyone watched him be terrible and used him in lineups and destroyed lineups. Like, he's in a really good spot this week in probably the highest total game of the week, and no one wants to use him. That seems like a perfect time to go back to him.
Yeah, I probably am going to be 50% Jared Goff, maybe. Like I want to be pretty much as close to all in as you can reasonably be on Goff, Cooper Kupp, Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods, Gerald Everett, whoever the starting running back is. I just want to be loaded up on these guys because it's not very often you're going to see the public shy away from the highest total game of the week against a defense that is just the Falcons give up no resistance at all. They just let other teams do whatever they want.
I think the hardest thing here is I think you want to game stack it. I won't play enough lineups to have let's say, Goff and Kupp, and then a Goff and Woods, and a Goff and Cooks, and then a Goff and Everett, or maybe even triple stack them. I'm more concerned about who do I bring this back with on the other side. Like, do we think that Jalen Ramsey ends up playing for the Rams this week?
Yeah, seems like that's what the reporting was, is that he was going to be ready to go. And I think that he's a man corner, right? So it's not even like he needs to know the defensive assignment that well. You just go tell him to go cover Julio Jones. Exactly.
So let's say, so that one leaves Julio as a very interesting pivot play or even contrarian play at the very top. He's just too expensive. I'm not going to end up using him here, despite the fact that no one's really going to own him. So that leaves Ridley, that leaves Sanu, and that leaves Austin Hooper as a guy to bring it back with if I'm going to use Goff and Kupp here. And I might need the savings, and I feel like a lot of people will go with Ridley, but Hooper might be the play to bring it back with.
Get ready to enter the cage. DraftKings and the Professional Fighters League have partnered up once again to bring you closer to MMA action than ever before. Introducing the 2019 PFL Playoff Bracket Challenge game presented by Presidente, where you get a shot at winning a slice of $30,000 in total cash prizing. Here's how. Simply make picks for each of the 3 upcoming PFL playoff events on October 11th, 17th, and 31st by selecting who you think has the best shot to advance to the quarterfinal and semifinal fights in each weight class. Watch all the fights live on ESPN2 and ESPN Plus. Every correct pick will earn you points so you can take down the competition and climb the leaderboard, getting you closer to a piece of the prize. Each correct pick in the quarterfinals, it's going to be worth 100 points and 200 points for a correct pick in the semifinals. You will have a shot at winning up to $10,000 in cash awarded to the first place finisher for each PFL playoff event. So choose wisely. Knock out the competition by playing the 2019 PFL Playoffs Bracket Challenge presented by Presidente on DraftKings, and watch all the fights on ESPN2 and ESPN Plus live from Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas. The PFL Men's Lightweight Quarterfinal, it is stacked, and Randy Couture, you've got a few words you would like to share about it. So I say Ahmed Aliyev versus Rashid Magomedov, and you say what?
Tough one to pick. Ahmed Aliyev and Rashid Magomedov, coming in at 4-5. Both guys have been up and down in the regular season. You can make a case for either one of these guys winning this. It's really going to go out who goes out and imposes their will on the other guy. But pretty even matchup.
Okay, the 3 seed Chris Wade facing the 6, and Nate Andrews. How did we feel about this one?
Chris Wade has a big chip on his shoulder. He feels like he got robbed against Nathan Schultz last year and last season. Maybe a dark horse. We got him against Nate Andrews, the Rhode Island guy that's coming off a surprise victory in his last regular season match. I think they fought once before, and I don't think Chris gave him the respect he had coming, and it was a very close matchup, but Chris Wade won the decision. So going to be an interesting rematch.
What will go down when Islam Mammadov fights Loic Radzhabov?
Radzhabov is a tough, salty competitor. He's been up and down during the regular season. It's a tough one to pick a winner, and that's always makes for an exciting fight.
So what can we expect when number 1 seed Nathan Schultz clashes with Ramsey Nijem?
Ramsey is had a walkover win and a walkover loss. We haven't had to see him or seen him compete all regular season, so it'll be interesting to see how he's faring in his camp, getting ready to fight the number 1 seed in Nathan Schultz. A lot of naysayers for Nathan Schultz. Last season they thought he was a fluke. He stepped in and taken the number 1 seed again, and 2 great performances in his regular season outing. So it's going to be an interesting night.
All right, we're getting you set for the PFL Men's Featherweight Quarterfinal. Talk to me about this Alex Gilpin and Andre Harrison fight, please.
Interesting matchup. Harrison, undefeated into the finals last year and then lost to Lance Palmer. Come back strong this year. He's always a salty, very smart competitor. Gilpin came up short against Palmer in the regular season, came back strong in his second regular season fight with a very slick submission. Two guys with great wrestling pedigrees heading up. I mean, toss a coin.
Okay, so what stands out to you in this 3-6 matchup? So it's Luis Rafael Lorenzino and Jeremy Kennedy.
Lorenzino is coming off of a knockout of Jeremy Kennedy in his first outing for the PFL. Kennedy came in a very big favorite in this division, and coming off a big win streak in the UFC, and then ended up getting clipped. He's outsourced his training now. He's kind of got himself back on track, and this is going to be a really interesting rematch from the regular season.
Next up, Movlid Khaybulaev and Daniel Pineda. What are your expectations?
Movlid Khaybulaev took the league by storm with the fastest knockout and a flying knee in his opening match in the regular season. So he's got a full head of steam to secure that number 2 seed. Daniel Pineda got a walkover win. We haven't seen a lot of him, so he's taking on one of the favorites in the division right off the bat. Should be interesting.
And then the number 1 seed, Lance Palmer, facing Gaji Rabadanov. How does this one play out?
Well, Lance Palmer's coming in with a full head of steam, last year's champ. I love his style. Some people boo him because they think he's a little too controlling and uses a little too much of his wrestling, but it really works for me. And I think he's the favorite for this division probably, but he's going to have his hands full with Gaji Rabadanov, who's relatively untested, slid in to get the number 8 seed. It'll be interesting to see. Both these guys use their wrestling very, very well. So who's going to establish their game and control the other guy?
The Astros and Yankees are back tonight for Game 4 of the ALCS after that pesky weather delay. And DraftKings contributor Gary Thorne is here for MLB Pickoff, making some predictions for tonight's game. Gary, we got a rematch of the Game 1 starters, Zack Greinke and Masahiro Tanaka. Now, the Yankees took that game 7-0, and they're at home. New York is minus 134 to make it 2-for-2 when Tanaka starts. Would you pick them to win and even this up?
I would. Look, I don't think I'm as afraid of Zack Greinke and the struggles he's had through 2 postseason starts as maybe some people are, but I just happen to think that Masahiro Tanaka matches up really well against this Astros lineup. I mean, we're talking about someone who the big narrative surrounding Tanaka for most of the season was he pitches much better at Yankee Stadium than he does on the road, and his WOBA within both of those splits really does bear out that storyline. He's also had significant split differentials when it comes to right-handed batters and left-handed batters. He's held right-handed batters to a 274 WOBA, whereas lefties have had a lot more success against him. Now, I know the Astros have done a pretty good job of evening out their lineup, at least in comparison to last season. They added Michael Brantley. Jordan Alvarez has been one of the best left-handed hitters in baseball, let alone one of the young best left-handed hitters. But this is still a lineup that hinges on the production of George Springer, Carlos Correa, Jose Altuve, Alex Bregman, and that really falls into Tanaka's skill set. So I think the Yankees at minus 134 are a pretty good price tonight.
All right, tonight's run total is 8.5. So far, all 3 games in this series have been under that. So do you think that trend is going to continue, or would you take the over here?
No, I do think this continues. Like I said, I like Tanaka. And for Greinke, I mean, look, the numbers have been horrendous. The advanced stats hate him just as much as the surface stats, like ERA. And a big part of that is the 5 home runs he's given up in 2 games. And I can understand why people might be hesitant to say that's going to regress against the New York Yankees, who went on this home run race with the Twins throughout the regular season. We're in Yankee Stadium. That is a haven for home runs. But you look at Greinke, the other numbers still look like Zack Greinke. He's got an 11-1 strikeout to walk ratio so far in the playoffs. And even in terms of the home run problems, you go back through the regular season, a much larger sample, and also a time when we were led to believe the balls were juiced, and now we're led to believe the balls aren't juiced. This is a guy who gave up 0.91 home runs per 9. That was the 8th lowest mark among all qualified pitchers. So I just don't think he can keep struggling at this rate, especially now working on normal rest with the rain delay. So between my confidence in both starters and just the fact that both of these teams have very good and very top-heavy bullpens, I think this game does stay under 8.5.
I mean, you talked about how the Astros offense relies on the production from guys like Jose Altuve. Now, he's been a beast in this series. His odds to go deep for the second game in a row are plus 475. I mean, is he who you would pick to hit one out of the park tonight?
Probably not. Far be it for me to doubt playoff Jose Altuve, who might be the greatest player on the history of the planet. But there are two other numbers that I'm looking at. They're just a little bit more enticing. The odds aren't quite as good, but it's understandable considering the pedigree of power that each of these two players have. I already mentioned Alvarez, and I mentioned Tanaka's struggles with left-handed batters. And struggle might not even be the proper word. He's just not as good against lefties as he is against righties. 1.55 home runs per 9 within that split in the regular season. But Alvarez, I know the power hasn't translated to the playoffs as of yet, and he's a young guy. Some people might hold that against him in a setting this pressure-packed. But during the regular season, he was incredible against right-handed pitching. The only qualified hitter in the American League with a better expected WOBA against right-handed pitching was Mike Trout. When you're in that company of player, I think getting 3-1 odds to hit a home run are pretty nice. And then Gary Sanchez is plus 375. We can get into why I like him in a second, but obviously everyone knows that Sanchez has a ton of power.
Yeah, let's shift gears and break down the showdown contest on DK. Now, both starters are the two most expensive players. If you can only fit one in your lineup, who are you picking?
I think it has to be Tanaka, especially if you are like me and think the Yankees are going to win this game. The differentiation between these two pitchers might just come down to who gets the 4 points for the win. Tanaka, as I mentioned, fantastic numbers so far pitching at Yankee Stadium this season. And that dominance over right-handed hitters is not something I think you can just ignore. The strikeout upside is probably a little bit higher with someone like Greinke. But for as much as I feel like those home run issues aren't going to necessarily plague him to the extent they've plagued him the last 2 games, he's also not pitching well. And there's really no way around that. So I think Tanaka is justifiably going to be the more highly owned of the two tonight.
All right, what about who would you pick as your captain?
So I mentioned Sanchez. Look, you don't necessarily have to captain Gary Sanchez, but I think I'm going to. He's only $6,000. He's one of the most inexpensive players in any lineup tonight. He's only $9,000 if you captain him. So you could even afford to get both of these starters in a lineup if you go this far down. But I just think Sanchez is mispriced. I understand that he struggled with injury and he struggled with production in the second half of the season. He has not looked great so far in these playoffs. He's down to 7th in the Yankees batting order. That's not necessarily appealing or ideal. But if you go through the Yankees lineup, he has the highest expected WOBA of any player they have against right-handed pitching. And when he gets to hit against righties in Yankee Stadium, that is by far his ideal spot. His isolated power in the regular season under those conditions is 368. He's got a 153 WRC plus within those 2 splits. This is the perfect setting and perfect matchup for someone like Sanchez. And if you're ever going to use him, tonight's the spot. So again, you don't necessarily have to take as big a risk as captaining him like I'm going to, but it does save you a ton of money to get a lot of top-end guys in there around someone like Sanchez.
Well, speaking of saving some money, if you need a cheap player, who are you picking?
So again, it could just be Sanchez. But if you really want to go towards the bottom of the barrel, we've talked a lot about relievers in these playoffs, and I think Aaron Boone has kind of shown his hand with how the hierarchy of his bullpen works. Obviously, Chapman and obviously Britton are going to be the guys he wants to use in high-leverage spots, but there was some question coming into the playoffs as to whether Tommy Kahnle or Adam Ottavino was going to be the guy to work the back end of the 6th inning, the start of the 7th inning, sort of those, bridge innings to the back end of the bullpen, quote unquote. Kahnle's been fantastic. He's worked in 5 of the 6 games the Yankees have played in the playoffs to this point, where Ottavino has struggled significantly. And it seems like Aaron Boone is really trying to just pigeonhole him as a one-batter pitcher. Most of his appearances so far in the playoffs have just been to one right-handed batter, and he hasn't even gotten that guy out more than half the time. So I think we'll just definitely see Kahnle pitch in this game. And at $3,000, he might only rack up 5, 6, 7 points, but it'll come at a nice value and it'll come at an even better ownership.
Thanks, Gary, and good stuff. Gonna switch our attention here to college football right now. Ben Rossa will join me to preview Week 8 after this Wrangler college football preview with Brendan Glasheen.
How we doing? I'm Brendan Glasheen here with DK Live's Julian Edlow. We are getting you ready for College Football Saturday, presented by Wrangler. Julian, we've got 9 games to choose from in this contest. We're going to kick things off in the Big 12. It's undefeated number 5 Oklahoma hosting West Virginia. The Sooners have that high-powered offense. They're ranked 3rd in the country in points per game. So the Mountaineers have to keep up. Can they do that? Why or why not?
I don't think the Mountaineers are going to be able to keep up in this one. We just saw Oklahoma's defense look pretty decent in holding Texas to 27 points in the Red River rivalry. Oklahoma only scored 34 in that one, which is low for them, averaging over 53 points per game coming into that one. No game with less than 45 points. So this is such a high-powered offense. West Virginia, not a terrible defense, but I just don't think they're going to be able to stop the likes of Jalen Hurts, of CeeDee Lamb. That high-powered Oklahoma offense should get another big win, especially at home against the Mountaineers.
All right, another 6-0 team, number 3 Clemson. The Tigers head into an ACC Atlantic clash at Louisville. Last year in Death Valley, this was a lopsided game. Clemson thrashed the Cardinals 77-16.
Wow.
So it's a new year. What intrigues you about the 2019 matchup, Tigers-Cardinals?
It is a new year, and these are 2 different teams compared to what we expected them to be before the season. Coming into the season, Clemson was number 1. They were going to dominate, not lose a game. And we see them in their last road ACC game only slip by UNC 21-20. So they could have lost that game if the Tar Heels were able to convert that 2-point conversion. So Clemson is not as untouchable as we thought they might be. And Louisville is better than we expected them to be before the season. They just handed Wake Forest their first loss of the season, putting up 62 points on the road. That being said, maybe Louisville can keep it closer than we expect, but this should be a game that Clemson, the Tigers, run away with.
He is Julian Edlow of DK Live. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Glash.
Okay, and I'm Brendan Glasheen. That is a look at some of Saturday's top college football matchups presented by Wrangler.
The always awesome Ben Rossa of Awesemo.com is here to give us his takes on this week's most interesting college football games. Ben, it's an important game for Oregon this week if they want to keep their playoff hopes alive. They're favored by 3 against Washington. Do you see them covering?
I do. I'm going to stick with my Ducks. I've been on them basically all year. It's not an ideal spot. You know, they are away from home where they're certainly not as good, but I don't think Washington is that good, to be honest. They've lost to Cal. They've lost to Stanford. The line feels a little trappy, but, you know, Justin Herbert, they have plenty of weapons on Oregon's side. They look crisp against Colorado last Friday. I expect them to go and get a big win on the road.
All right, big game for Michigan when they face undefeated Penn State. DK Sportsbook favors the Nittany Lions by 9. Who do you see covering?
Oh, boy. I hate backing Michigan, but I'm going to back them once again. It's just too many points in my mind. I know Penn State's, found a way to stay undefeated. They got through Iowa. Michigan also beat Iowa, and we know what happened when they did go up to Madison a few weeks ago. But I think that Harbaugh will have them ready. I think it'll be a lower scoring game. So when you're going to give me 9 points, I'm going to roll with the Wolverines once again.
All right, number 18 Baylor takes their 6-0 record on the road this week to face OK State. Any chance you think they're on upset alert here?
Definitely. Oklahoma State actually slight favorite in the game. I think that tells you what you need to know. They're so much better at home in Stillwater. It's been an up and down season. They're breaking in a freshman quarterback, but they have a prolific offense. Baylor lost some key guys to injuries, and they are 6-0, but they've been on the road twice. Once was at Rice, which means nothing. Once at Kansas State. I think this is by far their toughest test, and I actually think Oklahoma State wins this game pretty comfortably.
Which game do you predict will be the most lopsided this week?
Well, this is a broken record. Alabama, 35-point favorite against Tennessee. Honestly, I think Tennessee has a fair chance to cover the spread. I'll be honest, it's 5 touchdowns, but at the same time, in Tuscaloosa, I'm sure Bama will win very, very comfortably.
All right, last game of Saturday night, Air Force at Hawaii. The total is 66.5. Would you take the over?
You know what, I will. It's a lot of points, but I actually think it gets over. Air Force runs the triple option. Hawaii can't stop the run. That's a recipe for disaster. And then on the Hawaii side, they can throw the ball all over the place. So I think both teams really find a way to move the ball and put up a ton of points.
All right, excellent work as always, Ben. I'll be talking NBA win totals with Gary and Thorne after we toss it over to Adam Kaufman.
Nick Eatman covers the Cowboys for DallasCowboys.com. And, well, Nick, I mean, we thought last week might be a breeze, or at least a nice bounce back anyway for the boys. It wasn't. Jets with the upset, obviously, for their first win. Now 3 straight losses for Dallas. I think what people are wondering first is, how's the mood in the locker room these days?
Well, I mean, they've been humbled quite a bit here, and I think that anytime you lose 3 straight games, doesn't matter who you face, your confidence is going to waver some. They sound like a confident group, but I mean, yeah, you obviously have been taking a hit here, and then when you lose to the Jets and a lot of the injuries that compound on top of the losses here. It is. I think there's more focus this week. I would imagine that, but I think everyone would be. You'd be lying if you didn't think that the confidence has been shaken on this team.
Well, once again, we're left talking about Jason Garrett's job status. It seems unfair to him that, this has to come, obviously, it seems constantly, every single season, especially in the wake of any time there's a little bit of a bump in the road. Here we are again. Jerry Jones has been asked about it. He's spoken about it. He's not losing confidence in his coach, but still the conversation's a little unavoidable after a 3-0 start. Do you believe that Garrett is safe for at least the year, so long as things don't go much farther south?
No, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say safe. I mean, I would. Safe is having a contract. I mean, not having a contract is not necessarily safe. So,
right.
Jerry is saying all that. He's saying he's not thinking about that right now. But I mean, it's 3 straight losses. I mean, I think if you kept going south, like you said, and more importantly, I think if the team stopped fighting. The way that they have. I mean, this team's fighting till the end. And when he's made moves in the past, 2010, Wade Phillips, that team was done. They stopped fighting. Ironically, they started back up again when Jason Garrett took over. And I think his tenure here, it's been up and down. It's been, pretty, you could say mediocre record. It's better than that. But his teams have always pretty much fought for the end. Even when they were 4-12 one year, they were pretty competitive. They stopped doing that, and I think you might see a change.
You got to fight for first in primetime Sunday night against the Eagles at home. It's silly, I know, to call any Week 7 game a must-win, but is this about as close as it gets, given everything that's gone on recently?
I think so. I do a daily radio show here. None of my co-hosts were with me on that. They're like, nah, they can still come back. And I'm like, no, this is a must win. You've got to have this. You've got to put a game, between you with the Cowboys and Eagles. You'd go to 3-0 in the division, and you need a win going into the bye week. I mean, this is a banged up team. Nobody wants to hear excuses, but the reality is that they're banged up and their depth is not as good as we thought it was. And so especially what's really killing this team is not just injuries, but injuries at the same position. There's 8 key injuries this week, and it's only covering 4 positions. That just goes to show 2 tackles, 2 receivers, 2 corners, 2 defensive ends. When you start doing that, you're playing with your third or fourth best guy, and that again, nobody wants to hear the excuse. It's just the harsh reality that's happening with this team, and they're not deep enough. And they're not starting games well enough. And that, if you want to put that on Jason Garrett, you certainly can. He's the head coach. He's not getting them ready to play for whatever the reason to start the games. And it's not just the last 3 games, it's the last 6. They've just gotten away with it the first 3.
Let's start with those injuries then. Amari Cooper, questionable as we chat. It's a fantasy matchup for a fantasy player, obviously, because he beat the Birds up last year. 16 catches, almost 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, 23 targets, just a pair of meetings. I mean, he was all over the place. Is he in for a repeat performance if, in fact, he does play?
Well, I would not go there if he does play. I wouldn't say that he's going to go for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's going to just try to practice on Friday. And so he said that he was going to try. We'll see. I think he might be a game time decision. But I'm telling you what, they need him. I think if he plays last week against the Jets, the Cowboys win that game, in my opinion, by 2 touchdowns. I think he was that much of a difference maker. And not having him out there really affected what they wanted to do, and it allowed the Jets to be aggressive and blitz. they're not doing all that when you have Amari Cooper winning his routes on the outside. So that was a very unfortunate injury. The Cowboys need, I mean, the Eagles are banged up in their secondary, but they need a playmaker like Cooper to take advantage of it.
We're inching closer to the start of the NBA season, and DraftKings contributor Gary Thorne, as you can see up on your screen, is here to predict whether the following teams will go over or under their projected season win totals. So I need you to look into your crystal ball here, Gary. And starting with the defending champ Raptors, win total is set at 46.5. No Kawhi. What do you think, over or under?
Yes, the defending NBA champion Toronto Raptors. Always sounds good rolling off the tongue.
Yeah.
Look, it's interesting. The Raptors, season after season, have actually been one of the easier ways to make money, almost the last full decade. They have gone over their win total 8 consecutive seasons. I don't want to play Canadian conspiracy theorist, but there's a lot of the Raptors don't get respected in America talk. There has been for a long time here in Toronto. And this is one of those things that seems to back it up. Their win total just never seemed to match their actual talent level. This year might be a little different, though. I do think, as currently constructed, their roster in the Eastern Conference should win 47 games. The problem here is I'm not as confident that they'll go over this number as I am worried that they might start trading pieces. This is a very strange year for the Raptors. It's a very strange year for a defending champion, where arguably they should be looking towards the future, looking towards 2021. Do they trade Kyle Lowry? Do they trade Marc Gasol? Do they trade Serge Ibaka? If any of these things happen, and it's probably going to be multiple, not one of these three things. If any of that happens, they're not getting to this number. So while I do think in a vacuum they'd clear this, I'm hesitant because they're probably going to start trading pieces. So I'll take the under here.
Okay, how about the team that picked up Kawhi and Paul George for that matter, the Clippers, 56.5, over or under that mark?
This seems like the easiest one on the board, and it almost worries me a little bit because of how easy it seems. This number's way too high. The Clippers, while they haven't exactly come out and said they're going to rest Kawhi Leonard, we all know they're going to rest Kawhi Leonard. There's no way that that wasn't part of the free agency process. This is someone who sat 22 regular season games last season. And, you know, really the validating part of all this is it worked. He looked amazing in the playoffs. So there's no reason to not just stipulate to the path the Raptors laid out for Kawhi Leonard from a health management standpoint last season. So you've got Leonard missing, let's say, a quarter of the season. Then you've got Paul George, who's already gone from being out the first 6 games of the year to the first 10 games of the year. And I know Zach Lowe was talking on his podcast a couple days ago that he thinks this might be 6 weeks for someone like Paul George. And, you know, the Clippers were a very deep team last year. That was really their calling card, but they traded a lot of that depth to Oklahoma to get Paul George. So if they're going to have nights where neither of these two guys play early on in the season, I mean, I know wins and losses in November and October don't necessarily count as much in the perception of fans, but they count towards this win total. So I just don't think they're going to get there. They're a 50-win team, but they're not a 57-win team, considering the lengths they have to go to keep their superstars healthy.
The Lake Show is projected at 51.5. What do you think?
This one also seems a little easy. It's really tantalizingly low, and I'm not sure why. I guess there's the similar perception that LeBron is going to get some days to rest. Anthony Davis is constantly hurt. He's already been hurt in this preseason with a thumb injury, although that's been cleared up. He's fine, but still, it reminds you just how fragile Anthony Davis has been in the past. But I like the way they've rounded out this roster. Obviously, you know, the big headline grabbing moves were LeBron 2 seasons ago and Anthony Davis this offseason. But bringing in someone, you know, as solid as Danny Green, I mean, you look at ESPN's real plus minus statistic, Danny Green was 13th in basketball among all players in real plus minus. He is just someone who adds to a good and winning environment. He's a plus perimeter defender. He was second in the NBA in 3-point shooting last season. So they've got a lot of pieces around these two guys. And I think even if just one can be healthy for extended stretches, they'll be fine, even in a difficult Western Conference. So I'm going to take the over here. I'll be bullish.
All right, Steph and the Warriors sit at 47.5. Seems like people are just not afraid of Golden State this year. I mean, over or under for you, Garion?
So again, massive health asterisk hanging over this team with Klay Thompson. He's been definitively ruled out till the All-Star break, which would be the first 55 games of the Warriors season, leaving just 27 possible games for Klay Thompson to play in. And I think the consensus around the NBA is that if Klay does step on a court this season, it won't be until March. And at that point, you're really not getting a whole lot of Klay Thompson. And we're not sure what version of Klay Thompson that will be. You know, there's even some thinking, especially with how the Warriors handled Durant and the sort of regret that their ownership group had because of how they handled Durant. Maybe they'll go above and beyond with Klay and have him not play this season. That's on the table. You can't ignore that. But I still think the group of players they have, and adding D'Angelo Russell, they're just going to score so many points. Now, their defense could be among the 7 worst in the NBA this season. It could be among the 5 worst in the NBA this season, even with Draymond Green. It's just not a collection of players that can withstand losing individual defenders on the perimeter like Klay Thompson and like Kevin Durant. But you look at last season, Steph Curry, when he was on the court, the Warriors had an offensive rating of 120.8 points per 100 possessions. That's unheard of. And if he just goes into supernova mode this season, I think they can get to 48 wins. So until the Warriors aren't the Warriors, I'm just going to keep respecting this team.
Seems fair. Garion, how about the Rockets, 53.5?
This is probably, of the ones we've talked about, the one I have the least sort of feel for. This number just seems really, really good. The Rockets could definitely win 60 games. The West is just really tough. There are 5, maybe 6 teams who could legitimately win the Western Conference. So it's tough to know who's going to have 54 wins when you just don't have the dreck of the Eastern Conference that you get to play 4 or 3 times over the course of a season. I'm going to go with the over just because James Harden, since he's been with the Rockets, this is a 7-year total we have now, this team has averaged 53 wins per season. They've gone over this number 4 of the last 6 seasons Harden's played. And then you look at Russ and you look at Harden, 2 things and 2 players. It's very rare nowadays you can say that a team has 2 superstars who will not need to load manage. These are 2 guys who take great pride in playing 82 games per season, particularly Russell Westbrook. So, add all those things together, add the fact that if they stay healthy, they're going to play every game. I'll give them the slight over here.
All right. Finally, the 76ers, 54.5. Keep in mind, allegedly Ben Simmons can shoot 3 now. Okay, he can shoot 3s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I do think he'll try to shoot some 3s this season. But the reason I think that is I think they'll just be good enough where they can kind of experiment. The Eastern Conference is bad. There are 2 very good teams in the East. And while I will say, in terms of a conference schedule and a division schedule, Philadelphia has the hardest draw you could possibly have because they'll have to play competent teams 4 times a year, which is more than you can say for a lot of the divisions in the East. They'll have to play Boston 4 times. They'll have to play Toronto 4 times. They'll have to play Brooklyn 4 times. But that's not daunting enough for me to go under this number. I just think there's a chance that we see Philadelphia and Milwaukee with a race to 60 wins. I don't think getting home court advantage is as important to Philadelphia as it is to Milwaukee, but I do think Philadelphia is going to try for it. They'll rest Embiid. They'll give him his 15 to 20 games off, but they have a lot of depth. They'll probably rest Horford too occasionally, but this is a very talented team in a conference that just lacks a lot of talent. So for being one of the 2 very good teams, I'll give them the over here.
All right, thanks, Gary, and we'll deliver those NFL Showdown picks in a couple minutes. But first, here's Adam Kaufman.
We've reached week 7 in the NFL season, so time for another Levitan's Leverage with Adam Levitan. I'm Adam Kaufman. Levy, last week, Adam Thielen found the end zone for you. OBJ and George Kittle, they each cleared 100 yards. How you feeling this week?
Yeah, stay hot. This is my best segment. This is the only place I get everything right.
Well, so everybody needs to watch it week in and week out, make some money. Let's start at QB. Daniel Jones, home to host the Cardinals, hopefully with some weapons back, obviously. He is 6,100. Really has not been good, though, the last few games. 3 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. So where's your faith coming from?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a concern that Patrick Peterson is going to be back for the Arizona Cardinals. That said, this is a team that ranks 28th in yards per play allowed, plays the fastest pace in the entire league, and Daniel Jones is getting weapons back, as you mentioned. Saquon Barkley, Evan Ingram expected back. We could see Sterling Shepard back. I think Darius Slayton has shown signs of being good players. So yeah, Daniel Jones has not looked good in some very difficult matchups. He didn't look good when they didn't really need him against the Redskins, but this is the spot for him to get right.
Okay, so Jones is pretty inexpensive. People can also save money, though, on Bills receiver John Brown. He's just 5,500 versus the Dolphins. He's produced double-digit fantasy points basically every single week. Do you really like Brown, though, or are you just looking for some action against Miami?
Oh, for sure. I mean, Josh Allen is by far the higher equity play. I think that John Brown is going to be his favorite target, though. Note that they traded Zay Jones during their bye week, and yeah, they'll replace him with somebody like Duke Williams or Robert Foster or Isaiah McKenzie or something like that. But I think that the more likely scenario is that more targets get pushed towards Cole Beasley and Dawson Knox, and most importantly, John Brown, who is just such a good deep ball receiver. And Josh Allen loves to throw the ball deep so much. And this Dolphins team is just, I mean, you can't beat the Redskins. You can't beat anybody.
Let's do one more. That's Leonard Fournette, 7K in Cincy. The Bengals' run defense is as bad as you'll find, really. His salary has not been higher this year, but the good thing is usage is up too. So you just thinking he'll explode? What do you anticipate?
Yeah, I think outside of Christian McCaffrey, I mean, no one is being used in as fantasy-friendly of a manner as Leonard Fournette. He's used in the pass game in a big way. He's used in the run game in a big way, and he plays almost 100% of the snaps. Now he gets to play the Bengals. I'm shocked that he's not more expensive. I know inefficiency has been an issue for Leonard Fournette at times, but man, you give me 20 to 25 touches against the Bengals for 7,000, I think it's going to be really hard for Leonard Fournette to fail here.
I think what we've learned is Adam Levitan's just like the rest of us. He is a man who loves attacking bad defenses. Levy, thank you very much.
Carolyn Azak here with your DraftKings Fantasy Flash. Guys, I'm starting to think the Dolphins may not want to win. Miami has started the season 0-5 and has shipped out a number of good players since the start of the season for draft capital. Laramie Tunsil, Kenny Stills, and Minkah Fitzpatrick have all found new homes, and the latest name looking to get added to that list appears to be running back Kenyon Drake. NFL Network's Ian Rappaport tweeted Thursday morning that the Dolphins have had conversations with teams centered around their 25-year-old running back. He added that the team has had no extension talks with Drake since camp and that he would welcome an opportunity to play elsewhere. Drake hasn't had a lot of success with Miami this season, averaging only 3.7 yards per carry, and he has yet to find the end zone. But a change of scenery could do the back some good. The former third-round pick has shown he can be a threat in both the run and pass game throughout his 4-year career. His fantasy value would get certainly a big boost if he found the right home. So Drake owners should definitely be rooting for a trade to happen before the October 29th deadline.
It's that time of the show. Everybody's just waiting to get these guys' picks for tonight's showdown. I can tell that Tom Ridgey is on the prompter because it's not moving. Showdown contest.
There we go.
All right, Chiefs and Broncos. Let's bring in Reed Fowler. He's right here. But let's bring in Matt Jones. And let's get to it. The Chiefs have the 3 most expensive players tonight: Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and Travis Kelce. Reed, which one would you consider a must roster?
Joe Flacco. No.
God.
No, not Joe Flacco. I wonder why he's not up here. It's got to be Mahomes. Yes, he's the most expensive guy at captaining. If you want to in that spot, it's $18,000. It's going to cost you a lot, rightfully so. He's the best guy. If you just look at what his production, right? We've seen his floor. We've seen his floor the last 3 games, and it's still 20-plus points. So if you wanted to attack that, you want to say who's a must-start in this. I mentioned Tyreek Hill has some issues, has trouble against Denver, whether it be matchups, whether it be that time of the year if he was banged up. He just hasn't had that same explosiveness as he has against other teams. But if you want to go with one, it would be Patrick Mahomes.
All right, Matt, you can't take Flacco. I'm sorry.
Man,
Shoot.
these are tough decisions now. I don't know. Yeah, it's Mahomes. Like especially if you're playing cash, like if you don't have Mahomes tonight and you're playing in cash, then like you could like find tons of other hobbies. Like you could do lots of other things with your time. Because this isn't for you if you're not playing Mahomes tonight. He needs to be on your roster for sure.
I will say, though, Travis Kelce, and if you look at Denver, they really haven't faced a tight end of his caliber. I think the first one was Darren Waller the very first week, and then they just haven't faced anyone. It's been like James O'Shaughnessy, Trey Burton, some of these guys. And so now you get Travis Kelce, a guy who routinely has been underperforming so far up to his standards, but he's still getting like 8 targets a game. And so if you wanted to, that's not a bad play because Denver, again, like I mentioned, they funnel into the pass game.
Okay, Emmanuel Sanders is going to play after dealing with a knee injury. I mean, he's had some big games this season, but hasn't really done much since week 4. So, Matt, are you going to roster him considering he's only 6,400?
I mean, I don't know. Like, this is one of those spots where I'm like, if this guy's going to beat me, like, it's just not going to be my night regardless. Over the past 2 weeks, he's seen 4 targets altogether. So yeah, I get the price discount and maybe that mitigates some of the risk, but we could just see them completely go away from him again, right? Like it's happened 2 weeks in a row. So I wouldn't be shocked if he had another disappointing night while he's still kind of coming back from this injury.
Reed, I mean, is the price discount enough to entice you here?
He was banged up coming into this, right? He only had 1 catch last week. He left that game. And so, I mean, this guy is absolutely, I mean, he recovers like the best of them. He's got like him and Saquon Barkley. I don't know what they're doing, but they're recovering at a rapid rate. And especially for a guy of Sanders' age, you would think that he'd be out of these games, but he's miraculously been coming back after these injuries on such a short time. And so with that being said, I would say no, even though he's cheap. He gets Travarius Ward, who's not, that's not a terrible matchup. He's allowing 60% catch rate when he's targeted. So not terribly bad, but go to Courtland Sutton. I mean, Courtland Sutton is a guy who's the target rate, the air yard percentage in terms of that pass offense. We know that Flacco likes to hone in on one guy. That's been Courtland Sutton. He's just been getting so much volume. If you just look at his entire year, I mean, he's getting targeted quite a bit. So pay up for it, Courtland Sutton and not Sanders.
All right, who would you make your captain here tonight, Reed?
Yeah, it's going to be Courtland Sutton. I mean, if you want, I mean, obviously with the pricing of the 1.5x, you can go with one of these Kansas City players, a lot of chalk there. I think Courtland Sutton is in a perfect spot because any way this game pans out, right, I think that, like, even if Denver is up and they're trying to run the ball, and if they do it successfully, like Kansas City has to come back. They're going to be passing quite a bit, and so that lends itself for a passing matchup. And Courtland Sutton, like I mentioned, I mean, he's getting targeted so much, and so give me Sutton that captain spot allows you to get those Chiefs guys at a reduction in price.
Matt, what about you? Who are you going to put in your captain spot tonight?
Yeah, I like that call. I think in general this feels like a wide receiver captain night in general, whether you want to pay all the way up for Hill or you want to dip down to Sutton. And I mean, you can, Kelsey's not technically a wide receiver, but he's basically a wide receiver. He gets the same volume. So I think those 3 are like, if I'm doing a 3 max, I will have one lineup with each of those guys in at the captain spot and try and build, from there. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Matt, would you play either DST?
I mean, honestly, if I'm not playing like 20 lineups, there's a shot that I'm really going to prioritize defense. Flacco's thrown a pick in 5 straight games, but he hasn't thrown multiple picks in those games. And I mean, I don't know. I don't really see the upside here. Like, even if this game goes under, I don't see like a mistake-laden game where you're just like, you're seeing all these defensive touchdowns. I mean, they're fluky and they can happen. And the chaos comes sometimes, but I'm not really prioritizing them in any of my builds right now.
You interested in either DST here, Reed?
I mean, if you want to, right? Kansas City is appealing just because you have Flacco who takes those shots. We've seen it throughout his career that he doesn't really matter what type of coverage, and that might have been either his receivers that he's had in the past or just his style of play. He's a guy that does that, and when you're playing him against the Chiefs, you're going to have to put up points, right? You're going to have to put up points even though they haven't scored a ton coming into this week. And even though they haven't done as their offense hasn't been as prolific as it has been in the past, I still think you got to pass the ball, and you're not just going to. I think we like to think that Philip Lindsay and Royce Freeman, these guys can carry a game by themselves, and it's been done before. But I don't think in this matchup, even though Kansas City's rush defense is terrible. And so I like that just because we know that Flacco can get sacked. But on the other side, I think it's hard pressed. Matt mentioned if you're doing something during this showdown, if you're not playing Mahomes, this is not for you. Like if you're playing a defense against Kansas City, this is not really for you, just because that offense can easily put up a ton of points really, really quickly. So Kansas City would be the only one if you wanted to play a DST.
Okay, Reed, where can people find value in this game?
Yeah, and it's going to be tough. I mean, I think Noah Fant is someone that a lot of us have grown to like, not necessarily because of his production, because there hasn't really been much in Flacco, which is weird, right? Flacco, when he was in Baltimore, he always targeted Dennis Pitta. That was like the tight end one that she always went after when Flacco was in Baltimore, and that just hasn't necessarily been the case, and that might be more so because of Fant not being necessarily up to speed. Heuerman is still in there taking snaps, more of a blocking guy. But he's someone that I'm looking at because we know that if he has the ball in his hands and he gets a crease or he gets away from coverage, I think he's someone. And if you want to go in terms of a ownership, savings on an ownership, I think DeMarcus Robinson, not necessarily cheap, but I think a lot of people aren't going to be on him. I don't mind actually if you want to be contrarian and captaining Robinson there. We saw what he was able to do with Sammy Watkins out. It's 10 targets over the last 2 games total. So not much, but look what he did against Oakland. He went 6 for 6, 172 yards, 2 touchdowns. We know Sammy Watkins is out. So in terms of getting contrarian, if you think people are going to be on Sutton or the other receivers and pass catchers in Kansas City, I don't mind DeMarcus Robinson.
Matt, where are you looking for value, and maybe sort of like Reed mentioned, like a contrarian pick here?
Yeah, I think if you're really going deep down the salary scale, Byron Pringle at 2,800, he saw 4 targets last week. Didn't do a ton, but at that price, what really needs to happen for you to pay that off, and then you can literally do whatever you want. As far as a contrarian play, I think that there's definitely a story that you could tell yourself for this game, that Royce Freeman as the captain could be interesting. It'll definitely be leverage in GPPs, and I think that if you build around that story, that's one of my things that you kind of have to do in Showdown. Like if you're making, say you're making 10 or 15 or 20 lineups, you have to sort of plan for a couple of different ways the games could go. And hey, if Denver does end up keeping this closer, somehow they eke out a win, you could see Royce Freeman really paying off in salary and, with pretty low ownership, especially in the captain spot.
Well, look, Deshaun Hamilton, too. I know we're kind of mentioning all of these players here, but look, Sanders, we've seen him get nicked up, right? We've seen him get banged up. And if you're trying to look for these spots where, Deshaun Hamilton coming into this is not going to project to get a lot of snaps just because Sanders is back. But if he re-aggravates something, I mean, we know what, like I said, this is going to be a pass-happy game. I still think it goes under, but I still think these guys can get production. Hamilton is actually pretty interesting because we see what he can do out of the slot. We've seen it last season. And Flacco, again, like I mentioned, if this gets out of hand from the Kansas City side, I think you'll see him if Sanders gets hurt. That's a little bit more risky, though.
But, I mean, do you think Kansas City is going to break this 2-game losing streak? I mean, or is there a chance we see them go for 3 here?
Well, Denver is a really tough place to play. You think these division games are always tough. Kansas City always plays, and Denver always plays. These guys always play each other tough. And so I think you have to if you're Kansas City. I don't think you're going to rely on Damian Williams or LaShawn McCoy too much. You're going to sort of go to the dance with the girl who brought you, so to speak, which is pass. But then again, I mean, you have a lot of injuries, and so it's scary to think that Mahomes is regressing, but kind of is.
Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that there's a real small chance that this goes sideways for the Chiefs. I really think that I think that it kind of clicks. I almost said Patrick Reed because I'm thinking about Goff. Andy Reid is as good as it comes with play calling and preparing on short weeks. So I think they'd be hard pressed to really screw the pooch, so to speak.
And for all you golf fans out there, CJ Cup comes on Golf Channel at 10 o'clock at night. Golf at night, let's go.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah.
More sports. Here we go.
Primetime golf.
Primetime golf. All right. That's going to do it for The Sweat. Matt Reed, thank you so much. This show will be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. And be sure to tune in on Sunday. We got all the NFL stuff coming your way. So we'll see you tomorrow at 6, and then we'll see you on Sunday.